Well,
There you go.
Hiro, you came from Cuba. You brought David a very special bottle. This is the Havana Club, 7-year. We want your professional opinion on Cuban rum.
Oh, I'm a professional alcoholic.
Megan, are you a drinker?
Cheers, of course.
All right.
So good.
So their drink is called Cuba Libre, which is
Yeah.
basically this and cola on ice.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, that's what it's called,
You
Cuba
don't need
Libre.
cola with this. I'd just take the ice.
I know.
Right?
So, yeah. Nice stuff. Well, thank you very much.
Our
Yeah.
pleasure.
I have never had Cuban cigar or Cuban rum.
Oh, never?
This stuff is hard to get, so.
I have
had a lot
something
of
at home.
fakes.
We'll send some to you. We'll send some to you when we get back.
All right.
So yeah, we're here at Knife Merchant, Hiro.
Yes.
Love stopping by and seeing our friend David, and of course Megan here. Thank you so much for
Welcome.
taking care of our
Absolutely.
Hiro's followers and fans. And I love to see what's new. So-
Okay. Well, I thought what I'd do today is try and do a little video on trying to help people how to choose a knife.
Okay. Oh, that's great.
We know which ones Hiro is using and things like this, but as far as when people are trying to buy a chef knife and things, I think there's a lot of confusion, and it's something I do for a lot of culinary students when they're trying to figure out which chef knife is best for them. So I was like, well, let's just give that kind of a tutorial here to your fans and maybe help them to be enlightened on the process, because there's a lot of product out there right now.
Okay, perfect. And here's the superstar, Bill.
Hey, how you guys doing?
How's it going, Bill? Everybody says how eloquently you speak when you're talking about knives.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I just packing some stuff, you know.
Yeah,
Can't
yeah.
survive on knife sharpening alone.
Actually, he could. That's not true.
So let's go over
Don't
here.
think camera shy. During the process of making knives down there, something slipped out of the tongs.
Right.
Banged himself in the head, so he's trying to.
Oh, that's what happened there.
It gives him that ruggedly handsome look. I
Yeah,
don't
the
think
head
this is a
wound.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Say you're driving out for the new football team, right? You guys still have the Rams here?
No, they were the San Diego Chargers.
Oh,
for a long
Chargers,
time.
what am I
Now,
saying?
I don't
Hello.
know what they are. We don't
Okay.
care anymore.
You don't care anymore?
It's like we just gave up on the NFL. It's like, okay, they gave us our Sundays back. Is basically how that played out.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to talk about with the knives, and this is kind of an interesting thing that I found that even a lot of the knife vendors seem to be unaware of when I'm talking about knife shapes. In the different countries, they use knives differently. So when they are looking to choose a chef knife, I think first you have to look at what your cutting style is, because there are three very distinct shapes on the knife. On a German knife, the tip is way up here, almost in direct line with the spine. It's very rounded, and it is very well suited for this type of a rocking cut. If you are doing tap chopping of squash and things like that, the sweet spot is way down here up by the heel. Nobody really makes a true French knife anymore. Sabatier makes some knives still. I am not happy with the quality of Sabatier. The old ones were outstanding. So this is the closest example we have to a French knife, and that's Mac. On a French knife, the tip of the knife is pretty much in midline with the blade. And it's also skinnier than a traditional chef knife. When you get into Japanese knives, we call them gyuto and not chef knife, and the tip is much closer to the edge. They tend to be much flatter. This is probably not a great example. This is my old Masa Hiro carbon knife here. Not so much rocking motion. It is still capable of doing a rocking motion, but it comes off more like using a paper cut or something where you're hammering down. These are designed more for a slicing motion. And then I think it's important to understand how you slice, whether you are somebody who tends to pull the knife backwards as you cut or where you push forward. If you're pulling backwards, blade width is not that much of a problem. If you're pushing forward, I like to have more blade so that it stays in line with the knuckles. For my purpose, not being adept at Asian cuisine, I like a knife to be in contact with my fingers all the time. So I like the rocking cut, however, it is the last third of most of our dicing steps. If I'm doing an onion, for instance, I'm chopping and I'm coming around slicing it this direction, and then when I spin it around for that final cut, that's where we're actually doing the rocking motion. And I do a lot of walking with the knife in this direction here. So first you look at where the tip is located and decide, do I want a German, do I want a French shape, or do I want a Japanese gyuto? The second thing you'd be looking at is the belly. Here's an example in Shun. It's a knife that I've recently switched to. This is a Shun Kanzo. This is not their hammered Damascus that most people are familiar with, but it tapers back just very slightly at the heel. So the first time that I picked this knife up and started using it, I found that as I was doing a lot of my cutting, I was not going all the way through the vegetable because the sweet spot on this one is right here. The thing tapers upward at the heel, tapers upward at the tip, and it forces you to move the knife forward a little bit, and which is a more traditional motion for a classically trained chef. It was kind of very eye-opening to me because that's the way that I'd cut for many years when I was in a restaurant. When I got into the knife business, all my knives are so sharp that I kind of got away from correct knife techniques. I am not working 8 hours a day. They're all razor sharp, so you can just sit there and drop them all through the product and there's nothing to it. But when I picked up the Shun Kanzo, I'm like, oh no, wait a minute, that's the way I was supposed to be cutting and the way I was used to it. So I love that knife, very rustic handle with Corby bolts on it. I find that guys like this knife and women hate it. They're like, that's just uncomfortable. What do they have this little lanyard here for? It's like, I don't know, you can throw leather lace around it, tie it to your wrist. I have no idea, but I don't hate it. The steel has been tumbled. This is an AUS 10 steel, which we call a high molybdenum content steel. Normally they're very mirror polished, and it's really hard to keep that mirror polished, so I think it was pretty smart of them to just, I don't know, throw it in the clothes dryer with nuts and bolts or whatever they do to get that tumbled appearance, and then sell it to you so we don't have to worry about little minor scratches on it. They pre-scratched it for us.
That's great. I like it.
So after you look at it and say, okay, this is my style of chopping, and I have been able to decide whether I want German, French, or Japanese in design, then the next thing, it has to be comfortable. So we look at the handle. Handle's a very difficult thing on internet purchases. We have it easy in restaurants because you can always walk over to the guy next to you and say, hey, I'm not going to use your knife, but can I just hold it and see how it feels and things like that. Some of them are very big and bulky. If you have a large hand, a Victorinox knife is great. The other thing is the grip. I am always under the assumption that everybody grips a knife like this, and that's just not true. Many people will grab a knife in this kind of a fashion in the home, or with the finger over the top. Wusthof on this classic icon has what I call a little humpback design on the handle. This one, you know, I test all of the knives before agreeing to sell them. This one I took home and I had a lot of trouble with it. For the first couple of days I just found it to be very awkward. It's not something that I'm used to, and I really disliked it when I first began using it, but I forced myself. After a couple of days I really like this. It firms up very squarely to the palm of your hand and kind of locks my wrist. I find that I do much better when I am peeling oranges, making diagonal cuts and things like that. It locks in very securely. I still chose not to use it in my set because I have so many knives that don't have that, that I either want them all to be classic icon or none of them with that particular handle design. The ideal knife for me is one when I pick it up, I just don't notice it. I don't really want to think about the knives. It's kind of an odd thing for a knife merchant to say, but I am not a knife geek. I like food. So to me, all of this is just a tool. It's a function of what you do to produce the correct food. So all of the knives that I buy here, I am a little bit snobby in that there are some of them that I don't carry because I look at it and say, look, I don't like that. I don't think it's going to work well for people. I know that there's some people that are happy with it. But in general, I don't want returns and unhappy customers. So if there's some of them that I look at and say, there are inherent flaws to this, and even though some people swear by it, I choose not to carry that one. So after picking up the handle, and these are just something that has to be done by feel, on an internet retailer like ours, by the way, you can always return these. It is absolutely known that you might pick that knife up and feel it and say, yeah, I am unhappy with it. I have some customers that I've known for many years, and they'll buy 3 and 4 knives at a time and say, you know, I'm going to be sending 1 or 2 of these back. And say, yeah, absolutely, grab the ones, decide what you're comfortable with, and return the others. Shipping is not a huge expense these days, so it's something that we're happy to do. After you've decided the tip that you like, the handle shape, then we start getting into the world of different types of steels. And here's where it gets really conflicted because there's so much information out there. So let me just start with the basics. There is stamped steel, versus forged steel. In Europe and in the United States, we have the capability of stamping a blade, or of forging a blade. That means that we can take a billet of steel, heat it up, put it into a mold, have a hydraulic hammer come down from the ceiling and smash this knife into the shape, and we eject it into oil or water, depending on their particular type of metal and forging techniques. At that point, that steel is pretty darn hard. So now when you start grinding away everything that doesn't look like a knife and preparing it for its final shaping, its handling, it's going to be labor intensive. So on a forged knife, nobody is really bothering to make a cheap one. You have so much expense in the labor of producing it that you might as well use a decent quality steel and try and get some money for your finished product. A stamped knife can go to both extremes. This is a Victorinox. They had been sold in the United States as Forstner for many, many years, but Victorinox, the red-handled Swiss Army knife company, is the ones who had made them. They make a very good steel. This is generally a commercial-grade knife. Most of the meat packing plants and poultry processors on the West Coast use Victorinox. For some reason on the East Coast, they tend more towards Dexter Russell. But this is a very good commercial-grade knife and pretty inexpensive. You're going to be getting something in a range of, well, these are MAP price controlled by the manufacturer, so I think they're about $45 on that price, and a boning knife around $17. So they're inexpensive, but they use the good quality steel. Now, on a stamped knife, you have a sheet of steel that is made in whatever thickness you want, 2, 2.5, 3 millimeter sheets. It's soft, it's in an annealed state. You pull that out, and when they say stamped, it's because you can use something that looks just like a cookie cutter and punch that shape out. On some of the better knives, they use lasers to cut it out on the higher quality steels. But you can stamp it out, you can punch the holes for your handle, shape it any way that you want for a knife, and then do the hardening afterward. So if you wanted to make a really cheap knife that hangs into the grocery store, stamped is the way to go. That being said, all of these knives coming out of Japan are stamped knives. Not the Minonokune and some of the traditional knives like this, where you have seen the guy hammering and pounding. That's a different style of forging technique. But looking at a Ninox, for instance, this right here is, I don't know, somewhere between $550 and $750. I'd have to check my prices on it. But that knife will be a stamped knife. It'll be cut out with lasers. This part that you see here is called the bolster, that metal. That's soldered on after the fact. You can't even really see it because they do such a good job of polishing these out at the end. But it is, the blade is running all the way through, and then they add these parts after the fact. So stamped no longer means a cheap knife. Forged may guarantee you that you're getting a decent quality, but stamped really runs the gamut from ultra expensive to ultra cheap. So, after we get rid of the concept of stamped and forged, then we start talking about steel types. In Germany, and for the most part in the US, what has been popularized is a 420, 440 series, let's say a 400 series of steel. That it's a decent steel. It can be hardened up to a reasonable Rockwell hardness of 60, 61, but they will generally leave this anywhere from 54 to 58. A steel that is that soft is very easy to resharpen. As you're using the knife and the edge rolls over, you can just bring it back over and over again with a honing rod. The downside to it is a honing rod becomes part of your mise en place. So when I'm working in a restaurant, I have the knife here, I have my honing rod over there. I may dice 3 tomatoes, wipe the knife, hit it with the honing rod, and then come back and dice 3 more. So a lot of people are like, hey, I just do not want to be fooling with my knife that much, so give me a harder steel. Meat packers, by the way, in particular, always want the softer steel. This is something they need a razor sharp knife. They have to keep production going all day. They really move these guys fast, particularly in the slaughterhouses where it's on a hook, these things are moving. If their knife gets dull, they have to work faster to get ahead of the line, take a little polishing rod here and hone, and it's a harden that steel. I forget the term that I'm looking for here, but you rub it hard, burnish, and you want to burnish the edge on a polishing rod, catch back up, and start breaking down the meat again. If you make it too hard, they cannot stop and run to a stone or knife sharpener, so they like their steel particularly soft for that purpose. So when you start hardening it up, there are very different types of steel. You know, I think I should back up one step and talk about how to look for a good grind. Because a knife should be tapered. a knife starts thick at the bolster, and it needs to have a nice taper from the bolster down to the tip. It also needs to be tapered this way, from the spine down to the edge. Of course, you would expect Wusthof to do an excellent job with that, and they do. In fact, the vast majority of these are going to meet that demand. This is an example of a knife when they don't want to spend any money on it. This is a Mercer knife. I sell Mercer knives. This has its use. This is what we use for breaking down a lot of lobster and things like that. It's what we call a beater knife in the kitchen. You don't want to spend a lot of money on it because you're going to be doing horrible things. Alaskan king crab, when you're chopping that tip that comes off the leg and cutting them into sections and things like this, you are just not going to do that with a good quality knife. There's no reason it's taking terrible abuse. So you take this knife and it's completely flat stock. They did not try to taper that knife at all. They just took it flat, and then this is what they call a hollow ground edge. On that hollow ground edge, we have two wheels that roll through, and they put a quick down and dirty edge on a knife like this. They have thinned it in this area. You'll find it's actually a little bit thicker out on the very cutting edge, the apex, than it is down in here. But whenever you see that kind of a line on a knife, you know that this is somebody who did not want to spend the money on doing a full face grind. This is the most expensive part, and a lot of the most skill required on making knife is how they taper that. These ones, just a blunt instrument. You can see that there's no taper from here to the tip, just no work being done on it. Rip it through a machine, and the price will show. You know, this has its purpose. As I say, it's your beater knife. So that's one good indicator. If you see that on a knife, I really suggest passing on it.
What about doing the dirty work?
Yeah, if you need a beater knife,
right?
that's
Yeah.
it. And Mercer, by the way, makes good steel. This is a very good company, and something that we put into a lot of culinary kits. This is they have different lines of knives also. This is the Mercer Millennia, and all of their other Millennia knives are fully tapered. They have a wide 8-inch chef knife and a wide 10-inch chef knife that are designed specifically for the beater purpose. So I really don't mean to denigrate Mercer. The company makes great products. They make them for the industry, and they knew what they were doing with this one. They were making it for a specific reason.
Sure.
So, yeah, it was hard to choose which knife I'm going to come down here and beat up and say, yeah, this is a hollow grind knife, you don't want it. But for the most part in the home, you're not going to use something like that.
Right.
So then the steels, I started kind of trying to lay them out in terms of hardness. As you start getting a knife thinner and harder, you run the risk of chipping. So the amount of money that you spend on a knife used to be an indicator of something that would not chip so much on you. But I've seen a lot of weird things coming onto the market here. There's some dull strong knives that claim to be VG10. They're made in China. They look beautiful. I would probably have bought one. And then when we come home, when they bring them to us and we start to sharpen them, it's like, holy cow, they actually did a hollow ground on the end. It's a flat stock, and with all the Damascus cladding and a hammer, we couldn't tell. And then when you get to sharpen it, it just melts away when you touch it on the stone. So when you get into the steel types, each steel has its own specific properties. This is an example, Gliestain and Masahiro. This is what we call proprietary steel. It's not going to be reproduced by any other company. If they are big enough, they can come in with their own blends, and they're kind of unique. This one is like a 59 on a Rockwell hardness. Gliestain is the name of that company. I actually like Gliestain. The chef knife that I use in conjunction with this ugly carbon thing is a 10-inch Gliestain. And that's because this weird thing with the scallops actually works. You may have heard them referred to as a Granton edge, because the Granton Knife Company in Sheffield, England, was the first one to put these kinds of things on a knife. But this is not the way they did it. They ran all the way down to the edge, and they're opposite each other, so they would effectively thin the blade. Those Grantons are for slicing knives. When you're taking meat and taking a long slicing motion like this, the moisture from that causes a lot of friction and a lot of adherence. So when you're trying on a buffet line and things like that, where you want to take one nice clean cut, you don't want to be sawing back and forth, a Granton knife works well. Also, these long flexible slicers can be very difficult to sharpen on a stone. The Granton knife with that thinned edge, you just use a honing rod. It's not even going to work on a stone. So that's what a Granton edge is, and it actually works on a Gliestain but you will see it on a million and one knives. Here's an example on this chroma. It's particularly on a Santoku you'll see these things. And that kind of came about because there was a television program and Wusthof had a knife that they were testing out. And this girl used that knife, and it was Rachel Ray doing her 30-minute show. Everybody loved Rachel Ray, loved that knife. They sold thousands of them. But a Santoku, of all knives, really, really flat on the bottom. Almost no camber. This knife is designed to be used in an up and down motion like this, although you can get a little bit of a chopping motion. That's not its forte. And these do nothing for a knife being used in that position. There's some people that say, well, I feel that it glides through a little easier. When I say it does nothing, I promise you that a potato slice is still going to stick to it. And it won't on this. So that's why I use this, although I'm not a Santoku guy, on my chef knife. When I'm dicing potatoes and things like this, it's no longer a function where I take a slice and then try and hold the potato in place while I back the knife away or flip it off. With these, you can just lay them down and go to town. So they're expensive, but it was worth it to me. I spent $275 on my chef knife, but it sped my work up so much that that knife paid for itself. So when we're looking at the steel types, then these ones right here, you're looking at something that will come up in the range of a 56 to 58 Rockwell hardness. You get to like a 59 on some of these proprietary steels. Masahiro, again, a proprietary steel, they'll do 59 to 60. And then we can start talking about steel types that you may find throughout different brands. This is a molybdenum steel. This is a molybdenum steel. Now, without being too much of a steel wonk, the advantage to a molybdenum steel is it's a grain filler. The best grain that you can get is on a carbon knife. These are what they call virgin carbon. When they say virgin carbon, they mean no recycled product has been used in the manufacture of that knife. So it is just carbon and iron, and it makes a very tight, very perfect grain. This one is Masahiro. I sell them in Kikuichi. Masamoto makes them. If you're looking for these traditional knives, I don't care what brand it is. They may be a little bit different in thickness, a little difference in handle size, very little difference in shapes, but as far as the steel, makes no difference. Pick the one that you're comfortable with on the shape and don't even worry about the steel. This one right here has patina. You can expect them to gray and get a little ugly and blemished like this. Red rust is what we want to avoid. As long as it's grayed and taken a patina like this, it's hard to get it to red rust. But if I start cutting citrus and things like that and leave that knife go for even 3 minutes, we're going to start getting red rust. So that's why people are into the stainless steels. When you went into stainless steel, the first thing you throw in is chrome, which is a really big molecule and just it makes for an edge that looks like an orange peel. So when they want to fill in that grain structure, molybdenum is a very good filler. It's a very tiny molecule that fills in a lot of the gaps. Both MAC and this Shun have a fair amount of molybdenum. So we call them molybdenum knives, mostly meaning that all of these have molybdenum. This one has a very small content of vanadium, a very high amount of molybdenum. AUS 8 steel, AUS 10 steel. A little bit tougher on this one, a little bit more vanadium. Then you can get into VG10, which is a very well-known steel out of Japan. It had been their super steel for a long time. There's a whole family of them, VG2s and VG10s, VG12s. This one right here is a Damascus clad one by Kikuichi. Now, when they do the Damascus cladding, what they wanted to do was take a thinner piece of the expensive steel and wrap it with some softer steel. And we can do it with the Warakami Gold. The knife that you used to use for many years was wrapped one time in steel. It's not done to be pretty, it's done to be functional. So that softer steel helps to protect the edge and gives a little bit more flexibility to what is otherwise a very, very stiff steel. And we want flexibility not really because we're trying to use it as a fish fillet knife, but because a knife gets bent and tweaks in the course of work and we want it to snap back to its original shape. So the softer steel helps it to do that. Whether you have it Damascus cladding or a single layer of cladding is really just cosmetic. Now this right here would be an example. Now Ninox will not say exactly what they use on their steel. It is my understanding that it would be VG12, and I don't want to say anything that I shouldn't about Ninox knives because The factory did not tell me what they're using. But what you can do on this one, I wanted to use as an example of how you can use a pure section of VG10 or VG12, but the amount of heat treating you have to do to this is substantially different. This is not just heat it up in water and plunge it, or heat it up in fire and plunge it in water or oil. This has very rigorous heat treatment schedules. You will heat it up to a certain temperature, bring it down and hold it at this temperature for 2 hours and bring it up again. And one of the steps they're baking it in rock salt. So this goes through some significant heat treatment to where they're able to get a slab of pure VG12, and it is not nearly as chippy or stiff as other steels of the same kind. And that's why Ninox is a pretty highly prized company. And also the beautiful handles. I can sell you this with a pure buffalo horn handle at about double the price. They have some calf bone handles that are colored and textured, also very beautiful, about 50% more. They have carbon fiber, but the basic knife, you pick the one that you like, and then after that the handles are vanity. So after the VG steels, then we get into powdered steel. Powdered steel is a different way of making a steel, where they have taken the vanadium, which is a hardener, the molybdenum, everything that they're putting into that, they have heated it separately, blown it through a mister, and in a powder form they can stir these together and pressurize it with argon gas. So in other words, not going into an oven. They're locking it into a canister in something that's very similar to like a number 10 can, and the tremendous heat and pressure that generates squeezes it down into a disc. They run that disc out through a series of rollers to the desired thickness, and then they send that out to the knife makers. An interesting thing about it, they've been able to get more vanadium in this than they have in the other mixes. So even though these on a Rockwell hardness now, you can get these 63, you can get them even higher, but 63 is pretty much where they normally stop. That steel is still not chippy. Normally when I start getting a knife over 61, I start getting really nervous. You touch a bone and you can get a little microchip. But these have been extremely durable. These guys here are Swedish Steel, Scandia steels. The cool thing about Swedish Steel is the very basic components that we're using, carbon and iron. The iron deposits in Sweden are extremely pure. They're dragging them from peat bogs. 16% bauxite content would be normal when you're trying to mine iron from an area. You can get up to 60% purity when you're pulling these from that area. So you're starting with a pure product, and the end result when they're done smelting it, trying to get rid of sulfur and all the different impurities, they end up with a cleaner product. So that's why Swedish Steel is also kind of highly prized by Japanese knife makers. This one, extremely thin and light. These style of handles, as we call our wa handles, an oval wa, this one is hexagonal. This is not a beater knife. This one is for precision cutting. One thing people have to realize about the Japanese too in their food preparation, they don't hammer through bones. If you've seen this guy work, Chef Hiro, we are very precise with the way that we use a knife and cutting around when we're going through chickens and things like this. We're sliding through the joints and we're not just hammering through. So these knives are not good for hammering through things like that. This
Now,
dragon knife.
hold on,
yeah.
David. I see Japanese characters on this. So this is the steel's from one country, and then I guess they export it to Japan, and then they finish it off.
Correct.
Okay. What brand is this one here?
Kikuichi.
Kikuichi. Got it.
Yeah, Kikuichis are pretty distinctive with their chrysanthemum. It's hard to see in this light, but yeah, here's their Kikuichi chrysanthemum shape.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, Kikuichi is great. They make no junk. They
Right.
know their knives very well. This one right here is kind of a unique entry. This is U.S. steel, BD1N, nitrogenated steel. It was basically a hard tool steel. And after doing some research on the powdered steel and saying, yeah, I understand, they did all this weird stuff, they blew it through a mister and all that, it still didn't explain the density of the grain structure. Why did this form such a nice tight grain? And then he determined it was the nitrogen that they were using when they're cooling off the metal, blowing it through the mister. So these guys started using nitrogen on the tool steel here in the United States and made an excellent steel. Problem was the production of the final knife, all those little details, the grind work, the fit and finish of the handle, it was costing a fortune, and the quality was not very good. So they sent these to Yaxel. Yaxel is a very old, well-established company that makes their own line of knives in Japan, and they're making this one out of U.S. steel. Apogee is the name of the company that's making them. This one we're getting very high on the Rockwell hardness scale, and here they're listing CTS BD1N steel. These fire knives have been out here in the United States for less than a week. The fire, meaning they have had the knives in a little different shape. They have chef knives that were a little bit fatter and a little bit more of that German belly, and I had asked them to give us something a little bit more traditional shape for my style of cutting, and they have done that. So we have a new 10-inch and 8-inch chef knife and a slicer. They made a very good slicer, but it was 9.5 inches long, which is great for the household. It fits in a knife block, but they have big handles on it for people with big hands, and on the slicer I didn't have good knuckle clearance, and also I like over 10 inches. When I'm trying to do slicing, I want one long draw. So 9.5 inches was just a little too short. So the new chef knives down here have been great. This one right here is kind of a new type of steel. This one is a Jinsan 3. The unique feature about Jinsan 3 is that it is stainless steel, but it is made the same way that they do the carbon steel knives, where you have a soft steel and a hard steel folded together. This is a Japanese forged knife that is made by a master who is going to be hammering the two steels together and putting them into the charcoal and cooling them in all those techniques. It was actually something I need to learn more about because it's a unique steel, and when they were trying to explain to me what they offered and were showing me the knife, I was very confused because I saw these lines and said, well, clearly this is a carbon knife. It was noisy environment when I was trying to talk to the knife makers. This particular one is made by Jiko. But Minanokune, the knife line that we are working to keep the masters and apprentices together, and the knife line that Hiro has chosen to use that were made to his specifications, they are offering to make these knives also in Jinsan 3, which is very fun. The price points are a little high. It's about $300 for this knife. This one is a unique shape though. I was actually unaware, Miyarushi. This is a cross between a Deba and a Yanagi. We had a gentleman come in to have his knife sharpened, and I don't know how I missed this. With all the Japanese knives that I've worked with and all the time I've spent there, I was unfamiliar with this shape. Not quite as thick as a standard Deba, and it's a lot easier to break down a larger fish. This is actually a short one at 210 millimeters. We also have them at 240. But for some customers who have asked, comparing it with a regular Deba here, much, much thicker. But for some of these customers who have come to me saying, look, they're getting in really big tunas and they want a 240 millimeter Deba, this is a much better option. And these are like swinging a battle axe when they start getting to that kind of a length. But my point in choosing a knife is when you're trying to make a selection, steel type is important also. A lot of it has to come from trusting the guy that you're buying from. I can't even recommend particular brands. I like Miyabi Kaizen knives. We sell them. They have a knife line that is available at a big store, let me put it that way, and it's made of an AEBL steel. AEBL is steel that is famous for using it in disposable razor blades. I would have purchased that knife. It is a great looking piece. In the Damascus patterning that they use, the shape of the knife is great, and out of the box it is extremely sharp, just as a razor blade is, but it will not hold an edge. So we have customers down here, a lot of them, who are bringing them in here weekly for resharpening, and there's a lot of regret when they buy those. So it's helpful to talk to somebody like me, or talk to, if you're in the restaurant industry, ask your chefs what they've been using and what they're happy with, because the guys who are using it 8 hours a day are really going to know. But each of them has its advantage and disadvantage. I can promise you that if you get a set of Wusthof icons in, or any of the Wusthof, any of the standard German knives, in 15 years that knife is still going to look great in a home use. Some of the more expensive Japanese brands, if somebody is not careful in how they use them, then they get a lot of micro pitting and chipping, and we're constantly having to grind them and fix them, and they don't look so good in 15 years. But for real food enthusiasts who enjoy being able to take a knife and just glide through food and have a proper motion, And I just mean reasonable care. Reasonable care means don't take the knife and use it for something for which it was not intended. You know, the tip of that knife is not a screwdriver. You are never, if you're having to lift that knife and hammer with it, it's going to break. So otherwise, I think they're all very enjoyable. Price points should be fairly reflective of the amount of labor and quality that went into the steel. There is, most of the knives that we have down here are two-sided, double beveled knives. The Minanakunis, when we buy these, this is a true single beveled knife. The back side of these are hollowed out, and this is what a Japanese chef will use. The reason being, to get the ultimate thin edge, it has to be one-sided. It'll be flat on the back and a very low 10-degree angle. To make a knife that is that thin, and one-sided, the reason it's concave is when we set that knife down on a sharpening stone, if it's hollowed on the backside, then we're assured that we're getting full contact with the stone. If they try and grind it flat, there's always little ripples and things like this, so it never really makes full contact. So when you see this type of a shinogi line in this shape, that is what it's designed for. This is the ultimate sharpness that you're going to achieve in a knife, is on a Japanese sushi knife. Now, there are Japanese knives that are manufactured one-sided. Masahiro is an example of one. Masahiro, when they are making a knife, some manufacturers will take a V-shaped knife and put more of an edge on one side than the other. That is not a one-sided knife. A Masahiro knife has a right triangle shape to it. So if you're left-handed, you need to buy a left-handed knife. It will never track correctly. But it's what we call, there will be people saying it's an 80-20, it's a 70-30, exactly how much back bevel do they have. When they sharpen this knife, they'll place it down on the stone and sharpen this edge. As you do so, the metal will curl around a little bit to the backside, and that burr needs to be knocked off. Most of these are hand-finished knives, and when they come around to knock off that back bevel, these guys don't break out protractors to see if it's an 80-20 edge or 70-30. Feel free to do whatever you want on the backside of the knife. Ideally, you want to get it as close to 100-0 as possible. This one is mine that I've used for many years. What I like to do when I'm sharpening my knife, I will put a nice low angle on the front side. When I'm knocking that burr off, though, I will come back and pretend that this is a German knife, and I'll come really high. Even, you know, German knives are generally 22 degrees. I'll put that at least 25 degrees to not only knock off the back bevel, but also to put a little bit more steel underneath the edge. It's a very, very small amount of back bevel on it, but it is at a significant enough angle that it helps it to hold its edge for a long period of time. But, you know, those little details we'll get into knife sharpening when we're working with Bill. For our main purposes today, I just wanted to look at, say, when you're choosing a knife, you choose the shape of the knife, you choose the handle of the knife, choose the style of the grind, and then look for a metal that's going to suit your purposes. The harder and the thinner means that you're going to have to be more delicate with it. That's all. I do have a couple of things over here that I wanted to show you, though.
Okay.
I know you have this great thermometer that you love. We sell things like this. Oh, this one's way better.
Look at
You
that.
can see the size of the area that
Oh,
you're actually taking
Dave,
the
this is
temperature
awesome.
of, as opposed to a little dot.
Hiro, my new toy? Do I get a new toy this trip?
You get a new toy.
You should.
The other thing is, it's a probe thermometer as well.
Okay.
Ultra
Wow, look
fast
at that.
read, 2 seconds or less.
Okay.
So if anybody's ever had a Thermopin, that style of thermal coupling that was patented by Thermopin, their patent is up. So now CDN makes these things. Much better thermometer for what you're trying to do.
We got ours at Home Depot.
And I just, you know, we have a myriad of tools. So if you're ever looking for the fish scalers, bonita shavers, quail egg shears, any of the Japanese turning slicers, products and things like that, we have those kinds of things.
That's great.
This in here, this is a present for you, Hiro. These makisu, maki mats as we call them, they come in a couple of styles that we have available here in the United States. The ones that are made in China and cost a few dollars, or the more expensive ones where this is like fishing line that they're using. They're like $45, and then as soon as you cut that through that fishing line, you either have to retie it or throw it away.
Wow.
This one is made by the Rattan Furniture Company. When they are making the best makisus in Japan, this is what I set out to find. Who makes the very best ones? Say, well, they hand split the bamboo because when they machine them, sometimes in the drying process they curl. These ones are hand stitched. I have to order them well in advance. They don't make many of them, but I just wanted to come to a company that was still making them the old school way. And that is the Rattan Furniture Company. They're still making the best makis in the world. And
What a treat
who
there.
better to use them than you? Anybody that's doing the most esoteric sushi rolls that I have ever seen.
Hiro, what do you have to say to this?
Good afternoon.
Again, unscripted.
Oh my god. That's what people always.
We have t-shirts now. Well, Hiro's got t-shirts and he's got a line of mugs and bags and hats. We're gonna do aprons soon.
I saw.
Konnichiwa. Yeah, he just launched that about a week ago, right, Hiro?
Yes.
Your line of
I
clothing.
wish I could bring here today.
Yeah, we should have brought some, but we brought something more important, something he can enjoy.
The Cuban rum.
Yes.
He knows me well. So.
David, thank you so much. It's always a pure pleasure and joy for us to come by and see you and just be educated. I mean, this is another language. I don't speak this language, but I learned a lot today. You know, I learned a lot. And I know a lot of our viewers out there really appreciate you. And there's his information down below. You can contact him by email and give him a call too. You know, if you want to talk to him.
Absolutely. We actually answer the phones here. And the staff is, it sounds like I know an awful lot about this stuff. My staff knows these things too.
Sure.
So
Everyone,
if
yeah.
I'm not here, my daughter Megan is often the first point of contact when answering the phone. But Amber, Bill, Jeremy, any of the people that are here,
Right.
they know this product.
Sure.
And of course, I'm happy to answer the phone as well. So.
Thank you again so much for your time, David.
Thank you. It's good seeing you.
Hiro-san? Yes, likewise. Hiro-san? Oh, show what you're taking back for your viewers and your fans.
Yes, this is Mino no Kuni.
You want to take one out just to let everyone see? We promised a giveaway. They've been selling off the shelf. So luckily we were able to get a hold of 3 to bring back. You can autograph these too, Hiro?
Yes, I do.
Okay. In Japanese, what are you going to write on the back?
Yeah, I'm gonna do sign on my Japanese character.
And what else are you going to write?
English too. Good afternoon.
Or konnichiwa.
Yeah, konnichiwa too.
Yeah.
Everything.
I'm excited. I'm excited for all of your fans and viewers. And thank you again so much for watching, Hiro. See you in the next episode.
Sure.
David, thank you again so much. See you soon.
Thank you.